Shay or Grace, do you want to talk about any changes that you see that are happening that you consider successes and could be examples?
Well, I mean, I think they're all over the country. And I think they're on, we just spent 3 years in this Beloved Communities Initiative, going from one end of the country to the other. And in every place, people were doing things that look like what we want a future to be. If I think about the work in Greensboro, where you've got people really saying, how do you look at a traumatic history, bring that history into the present, really struggle with the contradictions and move forward. Yeah. And, we talked about it just earlier about how because people don't do that so often, nobody can grow. Yeah. So here's an effort in Greensboro to look at a really ugly moment and move everybody, move the whole community forward. Right. And it's an incredibly engaging public process that they've been going through. Or I think about Nobuco in Los Angeles, because all this stuff's going on now about the Islamophobia. Yeah. When 9/11 happened, Nobuco was part of a Japanese American community and a Buddhist temple that immediately went to the mosque, which was like right in the next neighborhood, and said, look, we're here for you. We know what can happen in this country when people are accused of attacking it. And we're ready to stand with you. We're ready to partner with you. I mean, those are, now that's not some ideology exactly, but that is saying, I see myself in you. Right. And I have an experience I can give to you to help you be better and to help our neighbors be better. So that, or I think of the Center for Independent Living in Chicago, where they came to the AMC and all of that connection, to see the extraordinary degree to which people had to fight to be identified as human. I mean, what kind of a place is it that people have to chain themselves to a bus? Right. To have a city say, let's put lifts on the bus. Exactly. It's like why? Yeah. Put the lifts on the bus. What is the big deal? But the fact that people had to do that and that they were supported by people and that changes. So, I mean, I think it's going on all over the country. I think what is difficult is those stories don't get out. I mean, that's partly what you're trying to do. Get these stories out so people can see what you were talking about. They break apart and they take on a myth kind of that informs other action. And that's really I think the best organizing right now. Get the stories out of what makes us say it's worth saving humanity anyway.
What do you think, Chris?
Well, as Shay was telling the story of Greensboro, what struck me was how you have to see something negative as the opportunity to create something positive. Mm-hmm. After the 1979 massacre in Greensboro, where the Nelson Johnson and his group of radicals, members of they call themselves the Communist Labor Party.
Communist Worker Party.
And they challenged the Ku Klux Klan. Mm-hmm. The Ku Klux Klan came and killed 5 of them. And the black community blamed Nelson and his group for making that happen. And Nelson went back to the country where he was raised, and he did a lot of thinking. And he decided that he would go to seminary and become a preacher. And he created the Faith Community Church and created a beloved community around the church and a home for the homeless and so forth and so on, and built himself a base and was able to call for Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Greensboro and to have Desmond Tutu come and create and have the mayor and everybody involved in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But it didn't happen simply. It happened through a lot of negativity and hardship. One of the things that we have to learn how to do is to use hardship, to use negative experiences as a way to grow your soul.
The other thing that is really interesting to me about all these places that we visited, and even the other places that I know about, there is something about the continuity of persons and place. That, I mean, Nelson has been there for nearly 40 years. And we were just at this gathering at Fetzer where everybody who was doing good work said, well, I've been in this city 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. That there is something about the kind of relationships that can only develop over time in relation to place that is part of what I think has made, I think that's part of the strength of Detroit, that there are so many of us who for so long have been literally in the same place, same house, same place, same city. And that creates a way of knowing about the world and about yourself in it that's very different than if you're coming out of a theory and applying it, I think.
So Shay, you bring up a good point. How do you build on these successes? You're saying building sometimes requires time. Do you have any other examples of what building looks like?
Shay referred to this gathering that we were at Festa. It was a very interesting gathering because among the people there were, I don't know how many people know him,
Nani from Barrios Unidos.
Barrios
He's great.
Unidos, who's Latino, and Gil Sanchez, who's Native American. And both of them spoke to being outsiders, not being included in this nation. And out of their presence came the realization that we had to create a new nation that would provide for the general welfare, a more perfect union, to establish justice, and so on. And that created a different historical trajectory. I mean, we felt that we had to go beyond what happened in 1787, and that this was an opportunity to create a new nation. That all that history of genocide of Native Americans and the taking over of the land of the Mexicans and on the west, that all that had to be rethought and transformed. And I think that's a very important part of organizing at this moment, to understand that everything that we do is also a form of redemption for what we've done in the past, for our sins of the past. And I think it becomes really a moral issue. It becomes a spiritual issue. And I don't think we can organize at this point in the history of the human race without that sense.
That's great.
That it's not just a correction of that grievance or that grievance and so forth, but there is something that we have done in this nation that has to be corrected. And that's going to require a lot of growing of our souls.
Well, and I like the responsibility that's implied in that, where it's like you don't get to, I remember when we first started talking about white identity, like, in high school and college, and people were like, well, those are my ancestors, that wasn't even me, like, I can't believe you're holding me, like you're mad at me, because I went through my whole, like, I hate white people stage, like any good person of color does in college, that goes to college. But then you move past that, and there has to be the sense of like, what were my ancestors really up to? You know, and like what did we organize? Were we fighting at every turn, or did we submit? Were we compliant? Did we step on other people to get where we needed to go? And you know, I keep thinking about the quote, the Jimmy Boggs quote, you know, where we like have this, you know, we were kings and queens in Africa. You know, you go through that stage, like my people were kings and queens, and Jimmy's like, a king is still a son of a bitch, you know, like that every group of people, if you go back far enough, we all have those class dynamics. We all have those power dynamics, so that all of humanity then becomes our collective responsibility. And I really like that, because it's at a local level, you know, you can start to see the people and say, I have responsibility to you, Shay, to make sure that you can get around, and to make sure that Grace has what she needs, and to Jenny, and that you can imagine. But trying to now imagine the world that we have awareness of, that people in Australia and people in China and Indonesia and Pakistan, when they're flooding in Pakistan, what is our responsibility for that? What's our responsibility for what's happening in Haiti? What's our responsibility for every immigrant who tries to cross these borders because of economic conditions that we help to create? What is our, you know, it just starts to become really massive. But then you say, I love that, where it's like, then you do your small acts in your community, you're organizing with that huge sense of responsibility, that this is my personal redemption for all of that pain and all of that complexity that comes with the human experiment.